Okay, I want you to picture a scenario with me. It's one of those days.
We all have them.
We all have them.
Yeah.
Everything has been just a little bit off. You're driving home, you're tired, maybe a little hungry.
The worst combination.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you're approaching a merge on the highway. You have the right of way. You're doing everything by the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, this beat-up sedan swerves across 3 lanes of traffic.
Oh, I can see it now.
No blinker, of course.
Ew.
And it cuts you off with, I don't know, maybe 6 inches to spare. You had to slam on the brakes.
My heart just jumped a little bit. I think my blood pressure literally went up just listening to you describe that.
It's a physical reaction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your coffee spills into that,
Yeah.
that impossible to clean spot in the cup holder.
The abyss.
The abyss, exactly.
Mm.
And your heart rate just spikes. You're at like 120 beats per minute, and you look over at the driver. You want to see something.
You're looking for some kind of acknowledgement, fear, an apology, a little wave,
Yeah.
anything.
Anything. But what do you see?
Nothing.
Nothing. He's not even looking at the road. He's like looking at his phone. Maybe he's eating a sandwich, completely oblivious.
Oblivious to the fact that he almost caused a massive, massive pileup.
Or maybe it's not the road. Maybe it's the office. You send an email. 3 very simple, very clear bulleted instructions. Step 1, step 2, step 3.
It could not be clearer.
Clear as day. You've made it foolproof.
And then, 5 minutes later, you get a reply?
Exactly. You get a reply that completely ignores all 3 instructions and asks a question that was literally answered in the subject line of your email.
Ah, yes. The classic.
It's that universal human experience, isn't it, of having your peace, your sanity, just completely shattered by someone else's sheer lack of awareness.
Yeah.
And in that moment when the coffee is dripping or that email comes in, what's the first word that just pops into your head?
Well, it's usually not a very charitable word. It's probably something like jerk or moron, blockhead, or, the all-time classic, idiot.
Idiot. That's the one. We use that word all the time. It's a vent, right? It's just a way to let off steam.
Yeah.
But today, we're just going to do something a little bit different.
Okay.
We're going to take that word idiot, and we're going to treat it with a level of seriousness, of academic rigor that you probably did not expect. We are diving deep into a book called How to Deal with Idiots and Stop Being One Yourself by Maxime Rovere.
And I think we should clarify right off the bat, because I know that title, it sounds like it could be a joke.
Right, like a satire or something you'd find in a novelty shop.
Exactly. But Maxime Rovere is a legitimate French philosopher. He's a specialist in Spinoza, one of the great rationalists. So this isn't just some cheeky self-help guide you pick up at the airport.
No.
This is a proper philosophical treatise on what he calls interactional ethics.
That's quite a pivot, isn't it, from that guy who cut me off as a jerk to interactional ethics?
Yeah.
But I think that's exactly why this book is so fascinating. Usually when we talk about philosophy, we think about these really high-minded concepts.
Right, the big stuff. Traditional philosophy loves what Rovere calls the positive powers of the mind. If you look at Descartes or Kant or, go all the way back to the Greeks,
That's all about reason?
it's all about reason, logic, truth, wisdom. They've spent thousands of years defining what it means to be smart or to be virtuous, but they have this huge blind spot. They tend to ignore stupidity, or if they do touch on it, they treat it like an absence, like it's just a hole in the ground where intelligence should be. It's just a void, a lack of something.
But Rovere is saying that's wrong. That's not the right way to look at it.
He's saying it's dangerously wrong. He argues that stupidity isn't just an empty space. It's not a void. It is an active force.
An active force. What does that mean?
It means it exerts pressure, it has gravity, it changes the world around it, it affects you. And because of that, we have to treat stupidity as a genuine circular philosophical problem. We have to study it with the same intensity that we've always studied wisdom.
Because it's a force that we're constantly colliding with every single day. And I think the mission of this deep dive feels pretty urgent, honestly. We want to decode the mechanics of this force. We want to understand why interacting with idiots, and we should be clear, we're using that term the way Rovere does to mean jerks, bores, blockheads, people who just refuse to understand.
Right.
We need to know why dealing with them makes us lose our own intelligence.
And that is the crucial part. The subtitle of the book is, "And Stop Being One Yourself." Because that's the real danger here. It isn't just that they're annoying.
Right.
It's that they are contagious.
That's a scary thought.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try to define the problem more clearly. Rovere starts by making a distinction that I found really, really important. He says the problem isn't stupidity in the abstract. You can't fight an abstract concept.
No, how would you even do that? You can't. The problem is stupid people. It's real, living, breathing human beings who are getting on your nerve right now, in this moment.
The person cutting you off, the person sending the email.
Exactly. And he uses this incredibly evocative metaphor that I keep coming back to. He says that idiots are like a rusty nail stuck in a tender heart that yearns to love.
Wow. That is surprisingly poetic and also really painful.
It's meant to be. I mean, think about that image for a second. A rusty nail, it implies two things. First, the obvious one. It hurts. It's a foreign object. It's intruding on your peace, on your internal state.
Right.
But second, and this is the rusty part, it poses a risk of infection, of tetanus. If you just leave it there, it gets infected. But if you try to push against it or just rip it out violently, you cause even more damage. It does not leave you in peace.
I think that resonates with everyone. We generally want to be good people.
Right.
We want to be chill. We want to be loving. We're driving down the road, listening to our favorite show, feeling pretty good about humanity. And then the nail. The guy cuts us off.
Yep.
And that illusion of peace is just shattered.
And this leads us to what I think is the foundational paradox of the whole book. And this is a really hard pill to swallow. Rovere says that the moment you identify someone else as an idiot, you immediately lower your own intelligence.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this right away because that feels so counterintuitive to me. If I see someone driving the wrong way down a one-way street and I think to myself, that person is an idiot, I feel like I'm being pretty observant.
It feels like a factual statement.
It feels like a fact. They are driving the wrong way. I am right. They are wrong. How does being right in that situation make me less intelligent?
It feels like an observation, doesn't it? It feels like you're a scientist, categorizing a specimen in the wild. An idiot.
Exactly.
But Rovere argues it's actually a trap. We have to think about what intelligence really means in a philosophical sense. It's the ability to create connections, to understand complex causes, to bridge the gaps between different ideas.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
The moment you label someone an idiot, a switch flips in your brain. You stop trying to understand the why. You stop engaging with the complexity of that human being. I mean, maybe they're lost. Maybe they're having a medical emergency. Maybe the sign is covered by a tree branch.
All the possible reasons.
All the possible reasons just vanish. You reduce them to a single negative, dismissive trait. And in that moment, your analytic capabilities shut down. You stop thinking and you start judging.
So judgment is the off switch for intelligence.
In this context, absolutely. Judgment is about separation. It's about dismissal. It's about closing a door. Intelligence is about connection and understanding and opening doors. So, as Rovere counts, idiocy is a trap. It sucks up your analytic capabilities and forces you to play by its rules.
And the rules of idiocy are not good.
The rules of idiocy are very simple. Conflict, stubbornness, and a flat-out refusal to think. Once you step into that ring to judge them, you are playing their game, not yours, and you're probably going to lose.
That's a genuinely scary thought, that just by noticing the stupidity, I am stepping into it. This brings us perfectly into our first major segment, which is all about how this trap actually works. Rovere calls it the quicksand.
The quicksand is just the perfect metaphor for the mechanics of this whole interaction. It explains why you can't just, brush it off or let it go.
So walk us through the steps. I'm walking down the street, or I'm in a meeting, or at a restaurant, and I encounter the idiot. What happens to me psychologically?
Rovere breaks it down into what he calls a mechanism of contagion. It's like a virus. So step one is just the event. You see the behavior. Let's use a specific example he gives in the book. You're at a nice restaurant, and you see a wealthy-looking woman acting incredibly entitled, snapping her fingers at a waiter, being really rude.
Okay, and immediately I hate her.
Right, but before the hate, there's step two. Moral differentiation.
Moral differentiation.
You immediately feel superior. Your first thought is, I would never do that. I am a civilized, good person. This person is a barbarian.
I have to admit, that feels pretty good. It's a nice little ego boost. I am the hero of this movie. She is the villain.
For a moment, yeah. But that leads directly to step three. Disgust. You feel a sense of ugliness. You're physically repulsed by her behavior. It's a visceral feeling. And this is where the quicksand really grabs your ankle. Because step four is the loss of empathy. As that disgust rises, your ability to see her as a full human being just plummets. She stops being a person with a backstory or fears or insecurities. She just becomes a caricature of an entitled jerk.
And then the final step.
Step five.
Yeah.
You become hostile. You want to punish her. You want to yell at her. You want to roll your eyes so aggressively that she can feel it. You want to see her fail.
And that's the twist, isn't it? The moment I become hostile.
You have become the idiot's idiot. You are no longer acting according to your own values, your values of patience, kindness, or class. You are reacting entirely to her. You're snapping back. You're sneering. You have been tainted by the very thing you judged. Rovere is crystal clear on this. He says you cannot be a neutral observer of stupidity. The moment you judge it, you are in it. You're part of the equation now.
That is terrifying. It's like a zombie movie where you get bitten just by looking at the zombie for too long. So naturally, the question everyone is asking right now is, how do we stop this? I mean, the traditional advice, and I've heard this a million times, is just turn the other cheek.
Or kill them with kindness.
Kill them with kindness, be the bigger person. Does Rovere sign off on that kind of advice?
Surprisingly, no. He actually rejects that concept, which he calls moral switching, the attempt to suddenly flip from a state of anger to a state of kindness.
But why? That sounds like the intelligent thing to do. If I'm angry and I make a conscious choice to be kind, isn't that the definition of self-control?
It sounds great in theory, but Rovere argues it's structurally, almost physically impossible for most of us in the heat of the moment. Think about the energy that requires. You are already drained by the idiot. You're already irritated. Your cortisol is spiking. To genuinely turn the other cheek requires a level of sainthood or, a moral surplus that you simply do not have when you are already sinking in the quicksand.
This is setting us up for failure.
Exactly. It implies you can just thwart a conflict by reversing your emotions on a dime. Rovere says this is logically absurd. You can't just decide to fly when you're stuck in the mud. And what's worse is, if you try to do it and fail, which you probably will, you just end up feeling guilty on top of being angry. Now you're mad at them, and you're mad at yourself for not being a better person.
So you're deeper in the quicksand.
Deeper in the quicksand.
So if we can't be saints, and we shouldn't be judges, what is left? What is the alternative perspective here?
This is where the philosophy gets really practical. He suggests a cognitive reframe, a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing the idiot as evil, as this absolute moral failure that you need to condemn.
Which is my first instinct.
It's everyone's first instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of that, you need to see them as a pain, an event, like stubbing your toe on the coffee table.
Okay, a pain is different from evil. Evil implies intent and malice. Pain is just something that happens to you. It's unfortunate, but it's not a moral statement.
Precisely. And he uses this other great analogy of a certified letter. Imagine the idiot's action is a certified letter addressed specifically to you.
Okay.
It's not a random accident that you can ignore. It is a personal challenge delivered to your doorstep. The universe is essentially sending you a test. And the test isn't, can you fix this person? Or can you educate them?
Because you probably can't.
You probably can't. The test is, can you maintain your own humanity while this person is temporarily losing theirs?
I really like that. It reframes the whole encounter. It makes it about me, not about them. It gives me my agency back. I'm no longer just a victim of their stupidity. I'm the recipient of a challenge.
It does. And so the strategy becomes clear. Don't try to educate the person. Change the situation.
Change the situation, not the person.
If you try to fix the person, you're wrestling with the pig in the mud. We all know how that ends. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. But if you focus on the situation, how do I navigate this specific interaction right now to minimize damage to myself and others? Then you have a chance.
But let's be real for a second. That is incredibly hard to do because of the emotions involved. When someone is being truly dense or rude, I'm not thinking clearly. I am seeing red. And Rovere has a specific term for this emotional state, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Bedazzlement.
Yes, bedazzlement. And it's such a beautiful word for a really messy feeling. He compares a strong emotion, anger, frustration, shock to a firework display. When a massive firework goes off in the night sky, what happens?
Well, it lights up everything. It's all you can see for a second.
It's so bright that it temporarily blinds you to the rest of the stars. It blinds you to the rest of the sky, to the context. Rovere argues that a surge of anger does the same thing to your consciousness. When you are bedazzled by stupidity, your focus narrows down to this tiny, intense laser point.
That is a perfect description. When I'm really angry, I lose all context. I forget that I'm in a public place, or that this person might be having the worst day of their life, or even just that this entire incident doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. All I can see is the stupidity.
Exactly. The more emotional you get, the narrower your focus becomes until you can only see the stupidity. And what's the advice we usually get in this state?
Control yourself. Suppress it. Keep a stiff upper lip. Don't make a scene.
Just push it down. And again, Rovere challenges this conventional wisdom. He calls the myth of self-control into question. He uses what he calls the windbreak metaphor.
The windbreak metaphor.
Imagine you're on a really windy beach. You put up one of those fabric screens, a windbreak, to try to stop the wind. What happens?
The wind just pushes against it. It strains the fabric.
And if the wind gets strong enough...
It knocks the whole thing over.
Precisely. Rovere argues that putting up a mental wall of self-control just gives the wind of your emotions something to smash against. The stronger the control you try to exert, the more violent the eventual explosion will be. If you suppress and suppress and suppress, eventually you're going to scream at a barista because they put too much foam on your latte.
And it's not about the latte.
It's never about the latte. It's about the suppressed energy from the 10 previous idiots you encountered that week.
So if suppression is the wrong move, the answer must be expression. But we can't just go around screaming at people every time we get annoyed. That just puts us right back in the quicksand.
Right. And this is the clever part. The solution is what he calls the emergency confession booth. You have to treat your emotions as events that need to be processed, not problems to be suppressed. He has this great phrase for it. You must drain the glass to the bottom.
Drain the glass. As in, feel the feeling all the way through. Don't leave any dregs.
Yes. You must express the feeling to relieve the pressure. But, and this is the crucial part, you do it appropriately. You do not direct it at the idiot, especially not using logic or arguments. That's pointless.
So where do you direct it?
You vent to a friend. You write a furious, unhinged email that you never send, you just delete it. You go into your car and you scream along to a loud song. You treat the emotion as a physiological event, like a fever that needs to pass through your system. You confess your impotence. You admit out loud, I am powerless to fix this person and it makes me absolutely furious. That honesty is what drains the glass.
It sounds like a big part of this is just accepting that we can't win the argument in the traditional sense, which leads us to the next big trap Rovere identifies, the sermon.
Oh, the sermon. This is a big one. And I think this is where so many of us, especially people who think of themselves as reasonable, get tripped up.
I do this. I know I do this. The natural instinct when someone cuts in line or says something outrageously rude is to say, hey, you shouldn't do that, or don't be such a jerk. We want to correct them. We feel this urge to teach them the moral law. And honestly, a part of me feels like we should do that. If we don't say anything, aren't we just letting chaos win? Don't we have a duty to speak up for what's right?
It feels like a duty, doesn't it? It feels like you're speaking from a position of strength, of moral authority. I am the voice of reason here. But Rovere just deconstructs this mercilessly. He says that when we preach, when we deliver the sermon, what we're actually doing is making a confession of impotence.
Impotence. But I'm the one asserting the rules. I'm the one standing up for order. How is that impotence?
Think about it. Are you actually asserting the rules? Or are you appealing to an abstract concept of the rules precisely because you personally have no power to stop them? Rovere argues that when you preach, you split yourself in two. There's you, the powerless speaker standing there upset, and then there's the law or morality, this big external authority you're trying to borrow to make yourself look bigger and more powerful than you are.
It's like a little kid on the playground yelling, I'm telling Mom! The kid has no power. Mom has all the power.
This is the perfect analogy. When you scream, you have no right to do this, what the idiot hears is not a moral imperative. They hear a translation, and the translation is, I am at a loss. I cannot stop you. Please have pity on me and follow the rules so that I can feel better.
Wow. We put it that way. It's actually kind of pathetic. It's a revelation of weakness that's disguised as a show of strength.
It is. And he uses the telephone service line analogy to drive this home. We all know the special kind of hell that is calling customer service, right?
Press 1 for frustration. Press 2 for incandescent rage.
You finally get a human on the line. But that employee is powerless. They're stuck in a script. They have bad training. They have no authority. And you are powerless. You're stuck in a menu system that's designed to make you give up. The employee transmits the infection of impotence to you. You might fantasize about reaching through the phone and strangling them, and metaphorically, of course, but that fantasy is just a desperate attempt to regain a sense of power. It changes nothing. Screaming at the agent is just two powerless people confirming their mutual powerlessness to each other.
So relying on logic and rules and moral sermons doesn't work. And this is especially vital to understand because many of the idiots we encounter are what Rovere calls systematic idiots.
Systematic idiots. That sounds like a specific and particularly difficult breed.
What defines a systematic idiot? How are they different from a regular garden variety idiot?
A systematic idiot is not just someone who has different values than you. They aren't just people who disagree with you on tax policy or something. These are people who, consciously or not, value incoherence itself.
They value incoherent.
Yes. They do not care about logic. They do not care about consistency. Their goal is not to reach a shared understanding. It might be to create chaos, or to win, or just to express their own internal turmoil.
So if I say to them, but 5 minutes ago you said X, and now you're saying the complete opposite Y, they just don't care.
They don't care at all. In fact, they might enjoy the confusion it causes in you. They see your demand for logic as a weakness to be exploited. Therefore, debating them is impossible. The common ground of co-humanity, as Rovere calls it, has collapsed. The bridge of logic is broken. And if you keep trying to run across it with your brilliant arguments, you're just going to fall into the ravine every single time.
So the dialogue tip there is to stop playing with words. They don't want to understand. That's a very hard pill to swallow for a lot of us because we love to believe that if we could just explain it more clearly, if we just find the perfect words, the light bulb will finally go on.
That is the smart person's delusion. If I just find the right analogy, they'll get it. No, they won't. They're not playing that game.
So if truth and logic, what he calls propositional logic, if that's off the table,
Yeah.
what do? Do we just give up? Do we just embrace the silence and walk away?
Not quite. We just need a new tool. Since truth isn't working, Rovere suggests we turn to storytelling, or narrative.
Storytelling. Okay, how does that work in the middle of a heated argument with a jerk? I'm not going to start telling them a bedtime story like, once upon a time you were being really rude to me.
Not exactly, no. It's more about how you listen than how you speak. When an idiot is ranting at you or preaching their own twisted sermon, your instinct is to fact-check them in real time, to say, that's wrong, or that's not what happened.
Right. My instinct is to say, actually, the data shows.
Stop. Don't do that. Instead, he says, you need to strip away all the oughts and the shoulds in their speech, strip away the so-called facts they're throwing at you, and instead listen for the underlying moan. Listen for the lamentation.
The moan, what does he mean by that?
Beneath every aggressive rant, there is a moan of pain or fear or impotence. Treat their rant not as a series of propositions to be debated, but as a story they're telling about their own suffering. The content might be total nonsense, but the feeling behind it is real to them.
Can you give me an example? Let's say a colleague is yelling in a meeting about how nobody does any work around here but me. Now, the objective fact is probably that plenty of people are working hard, so my instinct is to pull up the project logs and prove them wrong.
Which will just make him angrier and more defensive. Instead, listen for the moan. The moan is not, I am the only one working. The moan is, I feel overwhelmed and I feel unappreciated.
Okay, I see the difference.
The strategy then is to respond to the story, not the facts. You don't have to agree with his fact. You don't say, you're right, no one else works. But if you respond to the story with something like, it sounds like you're carrying a really heavy load right now, you completely change the dynamic. You restore a form of interaction. You build a sliver of trust.
It's like listening to the melody of the song instead of trying to argue with the lyrics.
That's a beautiful analogy. Yes. There's nothing to understand logically in a melody, but there is a thread you can follow. And this leads to what Rovere calls diplomacy. The goal isn't to make them intelligent. You can't fix their brain. The goal is to prevent them from doing harm in practice. And this requires incorporation. You have to take their absurd view, and you find the tiny microscopic angle where it overlaps with your own.
You find the 1% of agreement, and you build a temporary camp there.
Exactly. Even if that 1% is just, well, it seems we both agree that we want this project to be over with. Great. Start there. That's your only path forward.
I want to pivot now to something that comes up all the time when we deal with conflict, especially with strangers. The law. Asserting our rights. I have a right to be here, or you can't park there, it's illegal. Rovere has a fascinating and pretty critical take on this.
He does. He breaks down that feeling of being in the right. We love that feeling, don't we? It feels like putting on a suit of armor. But he categorizes these rights claims into 3 different types. The first is demanding a law that doesn't actually exist, like people shouldn't be mean.
Which is a lovely idea, but it's not a statute you can enforce.
The second is citing an existing real law. You are parked in a handicapped spot and you don't have a placard. And the third is demanding a moral duty. You should respect your elders.
And his argument is that relying on any of these is actually a form of weakness.
It's worse than that. He says it's a form of submission. He calls it the submission paradox. When you cite the law, or you scream, "I have rights," what you are actually doing is making a threat. You are threatening them with the violence of the state. You are saying, if you don't stop, I'm going to call the police or the manager or the judge to come and crush you.
Okay, but
Yeah.
isn't that what the law is for? To protect us when someone is violating our rights?
In theory, yes. But in the immediate interaction, by relying on what he calls the big machine to save you, you are admitting your own insufficiency. You are effectively saying, I cannot handle you myself. I need Daddy State to come and help me.
And if the state doesn't come, which, in a parking dispute, it often doesn't.
Then you are stranded and you look powerless. He uses the desert island metaphor. He says, we are like shipwreck survivors, dreaming of a rescue that isn't coming. We are screaming for the authorities, but we are alone on the island with the idiot. We have to figure it out ourselves.
And relying on moral law is even trickier, right? Because that's not even written down anywhere.
Right, and this is a key insight. Rovere argues that imposing your moral law, your personal set of values on someone else, actually destroys the possibility of real interaction. He has this amazing line. To impose your own norms is the surest way of wrecking whatever part of them might be shared with others.
That's so counterintuitive. We think sharing our norms is how we build bridges. If everyone just acted like me, the world would be a great place.
But they don't act like you. That's the fundamental reality of the situation. So if you demand that they act like you, you're demanding the impossible, and you're starting a war. Instead of imposing norms, you have to negotiate norms. You have to figure out, how do we live on this desert island together? We have to create a new temporary set of rules that works for this specific relationship, even if it's not the ideal morality you carry around in your head.
Now, this negotiation is hard because, as we touched on earlier, some people just seem to, they seem to want to watch the world burn. There's a destructive element to certain kinds of idiocy.
He calls it the logic of war. This is a dark but essential part of the book. Rovere introduces the historical figure Cato the Younger,
The Roman senator, famous for one line.
Carthage must be destroyed.
Exactly. At the end of every speech he gave, no matter the topic, he ended with that phrase, Ceterum censeo Carthaginem esse delendum. Idiots, Rovere argues, are unconsciously like Cato. They are always fundamentally pro-war.
But why? Why would anyone prefer war and destruction over peace and construction? It seems so counterproductive. Because of entropy. It's just easier. Think about it in your own life. Building a good relationship takes years of effort, intelligence, patience, skill, and compromise.
A ton of work.
A ton of work. How long does it take to destroy a relationship?
A second.
One sentence.
One sentence. Idiots prefer destruction because it gives them a huge sense of power with very little effort.
He calls them pea-brain giants in the book.
Yes, like toddlers who have just discovered their own strength. What's the first thing they do? They knock over the tower of blocks. Look, I can knock this over. The idiot, in a way, channels the cosmic force of destruction. He even uses the metaphor of the god Shiva, the destroyer. They destroy the world around them, and also they do it with a smile on their face. They don't even realize the tragedy of what they're doing.
That is a chilling image. The idiot destroying the harmony of a family dinner, not necessarily out of pure malice, but just because they can. Because it's easier to mock your vegan cousin's life choices than it is to try to understand them.
Precisely. So the survivor strategy here, it's radical. Do not engage in their war. Make peace. But how?
You make peace by leaving them to their wars. If you try to persuade them that war is bad, you have already entered the battlefield. You are now a combatant. You are on the dark side of conflict, as he puts it.
So at that family dinner, when Uncle Bob starts his political rant, what do I do?
You are to treat him like miraculous cattle.
Excuse me. Miraculous cattle?
It's a hilarious and brilliant image Rovere uses. Let the miraculous cattle moo. You observe them from a distance. Look at that cow mooing over there. Isn't nature fascinating? You don't argue with a cow. You don't try to convince a cow to change its stance on fiscal policy. You just observe it like a sacred, slightly baffling animal. You detach. You survive.
I love that. Just let the cattle moo. That is going to be my mantra at the next Thanksgiving dinner. But what about when you can't just detach? What about when the idiot has actual power over you? I'm talking, of course, about the idiot boss.
Ah, yes. The idiot boss.
Ah.
This section of the book answers the burning question that has plagued workers for centuries. Why are so many people in charge so incredibly, bafflingly incompetent?
It really feels like a law of nature sometimes. The higher you go up the corporate ladder, the denser the air gets.
Rovere explains this through a concept he calls medianocracy.
Medianocracy, as in rule of the median, the average.
Exactly. Think about how power works in any group, whether it's a democracy or a corporate structure. Let's say you have a room of 100 people and you need to pick a leader. If you pick the absolute genius, the smartest, most brilliant person in the room, what happens?
Well, half the room probably doesn't understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
They might seem aloof or arrogant or just weird. They're not relatable.
Right, they're an outlier. They are alien to the group dynamic. Now, what if you try to pick the radical, the person who wants to burn the whole system down and start over?
Too scary. Way too risky for most people.
Exactly. So the group naturally, almost magnetically gravitates toward the person who is most like the majority, the person who is the most relatable, the person who best represents the fat part of the center of the bell curve.
So we don't pick the best, we pick the most representative.
And representative in a large group almost always means average or mediocre. We select for mediocrity because mediocrity feels safe, it feels familiar, it feels like us.
So the idiot boss isn't a glitch in the matrix. They're a feature. They are a statistical inevitability of the system.
They are the system working exactly as designed. And he uses the seal colony metaphor to describe the friction this creates. He says seals on a crowded rock will fight for space even if there's plenty of room in the ocean. The hierarchy itself creates the friction. The idiot boss isn't an accident. They are the predictable outcome of how we structure power.
And what about the institution itself? The company, the government agency?
Institutions are, by their very nature, stupid. Think about it. An institution is a static structure. It's a set of rules, a handbook, a bureaucracy. But reality is constantly changing and evolving. Therefore, the institution is always out of date. It's always lagging behind the reality it's supposed to manage.
So when the DMV feels hopelessly stupid and inefficient, it's because it literally is. It's trying to apply yesterday's rules to today's reality.
Correct. So the big takeaway here is, do not blame the official. The poor person behind the counter is just a cog in a stupid machine. Blame the institution. And for yourself, he gives this advice: fight for your preferences, not your frustrations.
Fight for your preferences, not your frustrations.
Yeah.
That's a great line. It could be a bumper sticker.
It's so good. It means don't fight against the system just because you're annoyed or disgusted. Disgust leads back to the quicksand. Fight for a better world because you love the world and you have a positive vision for how it could be improved. Change the world because you love it, not because it disgusts you. Love leads to constructive action.
We're nearing the end of our dive here, but I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
Does it feel to you like there are just more idiots now than there used to be? Or am I just getting old and cranky?
It's the question on everyone's mind. And Rover addresses this modern explosion of idiocy. And he says, yes, it does feel that way. And he gives 3 very clear reasons why.
Okay, please validate me. Why does it feel like it's getting worse?
The first reason is simply interaction volume. We meet, see, and interact with exponentially more people than our ancestors did. Physically, in dense cities, and virtually, online. More contact equals more friction. If you assume, say, 10% of the population is prone to idiotic behavior, and you meet 10 people a day, you meet 1 idiot. If you interact with 100 people a day via Twitter, now you're meeting 10 idiots. It's just simple math.
More rolls of the dice.
More rolls of the dice. The second reason is sensitivity. We have become, as he puts it, high-precision machines for spotting idiots. Our collective tolerance has dropped. We are more easily triggered by behaviors that maybe 50 years ago people would have just shrugged off as someone being quirky or eccentric.
So we have thinner skin.
Or maybe just higher standards for civil interaction. And the third reason, which I find fascinating, is the loss of codes. We no longer share universal codes of dress, speech, or manners. We live in thousands of micro-communities, each with its own norms.
Right. What's normal in my online gaming community is not what's normal at my grandmother's church.
Exactly. To a Gen Z kid, a boomer might look like an idiot for how they use emojis or sign off on an email. To the boomer, the kid looks like an idiot for how they dress or talk. In a world of fragmented codes, everyone else looks like an idiot to you because they aren't following your specific niche rulebook.
And Rover ties this into the inertia of personality, too.
Yes. This is a compassionate point. We have to realize that a person's personality is really just an adaptation to a specific real world they inhabit. The idiot is stuck in their world due to inertia. They aren't always trying to be difficult. They're just running an old operating system on new hardware.
And you can't just yell at them to upgrade their software.
You cannot. You can't change an idiot's personality without somehow changing their reference world, the facts, experiences, and community they rely on. And that requires incredible, delicate tact, not force.
So we've covered a ton of ground here. We've looked at the quicksand of judgment, the trap of preaching the sermon, the alternative power of storytelling, and the systemic inevitability of mediocrity. Where does this leave us? What's the final strategy for survival?
The conclusion is rooted in a kind of radical acceptance. But it's not a passive, defeated acceptance. It's an acceptance of the game. The game of human interaction. We can't destroy stupidity because it's part of the human condition. It's woven into the fabric of reality. He says solidarity isn't a choice. We are stuck together by invisible umbilical cords.
Like it or not, we are all in this together on this desert island.
Exactly. So we have to become strategic. We must alternate our strategies, negotiate with those who are capable of negotiation, try to change those who show a willingness to be changed. And for the rest,
Let the cattle move.
let the cattle moo, leave them alone. He says life is a tragic and comic game of separations and reunions. And if you can stop staking your personal anguish on the outcome of every interaction, if you can stop needing to win all the time, you can finally take a seat at the table where, as he puts it, gods and philosophers laugh out loud.
You can learn to laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all, rather than crying about the frustration of it.
Precisely. You become a spectator of the comedy instead of a victim of the tragedy.
That brings us to our final thought. We always like to leave our listeners with something to chew on, something to take with them.
Rovere leaves us with a mirror. It's a challenging final thought. He asks us to consider this. If stupidity is always interactional, if it only exists in the relationship between two people, and if we are all defined by our interactions,
Oh, I think I know where this is going. It's not comfortable.
who is the person right now who is looking at you and seeing an idiot? Because statistically, to someone, somewhere, at some point today, you are the one driving too slow in a left lane. You are the one who sent the confusing email. You are the rusty nail.
That is a very humbling thought to take into the rest of the day.
His final line essentially is, the biggest idiot of all is the one in the mirror.
Well, on that note, I am going to go out into the world and try to be a slightly less rusty nail for the people in my life. Thank you so much for this deep dive. It's been strangely therapeutic.
It's always a pleasure. Drain the glass, everyone.
And treat that next idiot like a certified letter. A challenge to be met, not a war to be won. See you next time on The Deep Dive.